Well said. Amen. Hey, I will say this. Some of us were privileged when we had our little table leader gathering about a week and a half ago. The dentist showed up. Dennis was there in his motorized wheelchair. And, the brother is very courageous in what he's doing. And I don't even know what that feels like. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine that my life is constrained to a chair and alone in a room. And as much as it's thrilling to have the freedom, imagine having zero people to talk to. So if God would move you, that would be terrific. Hey, Steve, thank you for keeping that in front of us. And Chris Watson as well has just done an amazing thing. Yes. The lady? Shirley? You can call her, why don't you, or you can call her the name of your first girlfriend, whichever you'd prefer. It would go good. Hey, today we're going to finish up. It's great that you guys showed up. Give yourselves a round of applause. You actually finished another session of Ironmen. And I want to thank Dwayne for being here today. Dwayne does normally not have to get up this early on a Thursday morning. And he came in because Josh is in California and some other folks. Dan couldn't be here. As you know, a number of brothers are out today for a variety of reasons, but we're here. And here's what I want to do. We've been talking for the last 7 weeks about what? What's the big word? Anybody? Tensions. Yes, it's about tensions. And I want to just ask you guys, let's just take 5 minutes before I'm going to tell you what we're going to do today, because we're going to really go after something fun today. But what are just maybe some high points for you so far for the session without going into every little week? But do any of you remember anything from any week over the last 7 weeks? I mean, it can be a thought, a phrase. I remember this week we talked about this. That was really good. What's that? The duality of man, meaning what, Tim? This vision of duality. Yeah, there's a thing called duality and dualism. Dualism makes a distinction between the visible and the invisible, saying that one is more important than the other, meaning that the invisible is more important than the visible, because in the visible, Ben, that's where your desires and urges and appetites live, connecting with our body. And because it's temporal, it really doesn't matter that much how you treat it. The real goal is to get out of this life into the next one. And what the scriptures say is that's not true. The scripture says there's one world with two realms, not simply a divisive of realms where both of those realms are two different worlds. One world, two realms, not two worlds. Make sense? Duality just means there's two. There is two, but the question is, are they distinct and apart where one's more important than the other? That's what the Hebrews said. No, we live one life. In God's vision, he created it all, visible and invisible. He's redeemed it all. And one day he's going to make new all. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, good. Keep going. That's really good. Anything else? Yeah. Thank you, Mati.
So my highlight was the old man, new man.
Old man, new man.
I've thought about that many times. I really like that fall apart quote.
Oh, yeah.
If we struggle with that, it's the Bible, the scriptures say I'm a new man, and yet I behave like an old man. How can this be?
Yeah. So Bart goes, I was and I am the old man, right? But I am, right? And I will be the new man. That the I am and I will be. This is really, really important. And so, the old man, we struggle more, I think, because of habit as well, as we've been used to listening to, giving priority to, certain habits and patterns. And we used an illustration that I tried to use. You remember the illustration we used to try to talk about this a little bit, Monty? The marriage illustration. And it may not be the best one, but it is one, and every illustration is inadequate. But the point being, Monty, how long have you been married?
34 years.
34 years. Give the man a round of applause. That's good, good, good. And a lovely woman, by the way, and a tremendous family. So 34 years, but there was a day you'd only been married one day. This was our illustration. And in that one day, your total identity had changed, but you were probably a whole lot more used to being single or old than new. And now, the last 34 years, you've actually been growing into what you actually are the whole time. And so you get better at being what you are as time goes on.
Very effective.
Yeah, so good. Great, great, great. We also use the caterpillar, butterfly, and some of that stuff. So anybody else? Keep going. Yeah, Carrie, thanks.
Yeah,
Avad.
Think about that all the time.
Yeah.
How everything we do,
Yes.
our work is worship.
Yes. Service. Yeah, avodah. That came out of our secular sacred week, right? What makes something secular is not its category as much as its direction, right? Does it affirm God's creational intent, richness, goodness, the flourishing of humanity, or does it push that back? And you can bring goodness out of anything that we do, and that God is honored just by good work, whether anybody sees it or not. Like yesterday, late afternoon, I cut my whole yard. Typically, I don't. It took me pushing it. It was long. I want to tell you, I wanted to have people come over and see it, how good it looks. But nobody does. Nobody else gives a rip. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, man, I'm beat. And but I think doing that is under the Lord, talking to the Lord, that God's honored even by that. So whatever you do, you put your whole heart into it, is done for the Lord. And because we make these distinctions, when Ken's running his business, that's a different part of his life than when he's here Thursday mornings, to which I think the Lord says, I hope not. I hope not. And this Hebrew word avad means work, worship, and service. Same word for every arena. And hopefully we bring our best to it. They're different, but they're the same in a sense. Good. Anything else? These are great highlights. Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, just the reality of the kingdom of God has come, but it's not yet fully realized.
Yeah.
D-Day.
D-Day. I sent table leaders. Dave sent me a great article on this just yesterday. I would encourage you to send that out to your guys. It's a wonderful article on B-Day, D-Day. But this vision that the kingdom has come and yet it's not here. Remember, we talked about what was V-Day? It's using the illustration we know from the Allied forces in Germany, but they basically said on D-Day, that really was the time that the war was won, but it took how long for it to be declared a victory? Actually, almost a year, just about a year. And in between D-Day and V-Day, there was the Battle of the Bulge. There was people that lived and died during that time, but there could only be Victory Day because of D-Day. And we said that in the kingdom, that the D-Day was the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He is coming again. In between when he came and when he's coming again, you could say would be the church age of when we are bringing and manifesting that kingdom that Jesus brought every day. And yes, there are battles. Yes, there are tensions. In fact, the fall session, we're going to do a whole thing on lies. And one of the ways that the evil one still tries to keep holding on to what he knows is not his is by constraining people through lies to be held in bondage and in a place where they experience death and destruction and pain and heartache. And so we're going to keep moving into this stuff a little bit. So understanding where we are helps understand things a little bit more. Great. Anything else? Maybe one more? This is really good. Great. Thank you, Ben.
No, it's not the band-aid thing you talked about, the butterfly example.
Yes, the butterfly. It's not the manliest thing, but that's all right, Ben. We'll take it.
Think about what happened with that butterfly and fly. I thought that was really impactful.
Yes.
Think about as you have to caterpillar fly, they actually not, but that's what DNA said. That's really
This is so powerful. Again, the DNA metamorphosis illustration of if you look at the caterpillar, it's not real, it's a little furry thing. And if you said this DNA says I'm a caterpillar, I just don't look like it yet, but I am. You give me time, I'm going to fly. I'm going to be what I actually am. And so with Chris, you just meet the Lord, you got some old habits like, no, man, what you are is who he says you are. What you are is what he's done in you. Not what you think, but what he thinks. And if I can learn to see me, then I can actually learn to begin to live the way he says I am and can live. This is where spiritual disciplines come in, not to make God love me more, but to help me begin to grow into what I actually am. And so that's a powerful thing. Very, very powerful thing. Then last week we talked about this whole thing to enjoy or not enjoy. Remember? And you probably left like, that's really great. I'm not quite sure how to do that, how much, but one of the things we said is that God created all things to be what? Enjoyed. And that we can also abuse things, that it isn't whether we're to enjoy it. The question is, does it make a brother stumble? Am I being mastered by it? These are some of the kinds of questions I think that can monitor us. How am I doing today with it? There's some things I think that I could enjoy today that maybe next Monday, not so much. I'm not on my game as much. This self-awareness is really, really important. So today, here's what I want us to talk about. We're gonna, I just want to write, I just got this thought this morning. Just think about this. You guys can. How you guys feeling? Is your temperature going up at all? Yeah, yeah. What's that? Yeah, oh yeah, they're just going up, right? Of course they are. That's exactly right. You know what I'm saying? We could keep going on. I could keep. You know, I was literally talking to some guys this morning. I said, man, we got to pray because I'm like starting to feel it already. You know what I mean? We could go on and on and on, like abortion, immigration, vaccines, gas prices, the economy. We could put some more up here, couldn't we? Yeah, we could, right? It would not take long. We could talk about gun control. We could talk about a lot of things. Nobody's talking about violence in our culture. You know, we can, where we got a lot of things going on, right? This can really get you, just seriously look at that. Let me ask you something. If we brought 4 people in a room that you don't know, let's just go out on public street, brought 4 of them in a room, what do you think our chances of having a good civil conversation about this would be? They arrested somebody yesterday that was going to Judge Kavanaugh's house who fully planned to kill him. That was 2 blocks from his house. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. The U.S. Marshals, he eventually saw him outside, turned himself in, admitted to what he was going to do, and then said, I was going to kill him and then kill myself. And he had more than enough to do everything. And now where does that kind of vitriol come from? It comes from, again, there's thinking behind all of these. There's perspectives on all these. We all have these, right? I mean, it's like, man, I love Jesus, but you get me talking about this or this or this or this. It's kind of like, I need to, you can feel yourself talking. Like, Lord, are you in this conversation? Do I know how to keep you in this conversation? Like, what does it mean to have you in this conversation? It's like, and you feel constrained, you know, like nobody's listening to me. And so I have like, these are like crazy things going on, right? Any thoughts just when you look at that? Come, Jesus, come. That would be really great, wouldn't it? But here's the deal. This is the kingdom is here and not here yet. Like these are real issues. We have to deal with each other. Gregory?
So if you didn't know, I'm a school teacher, but the kids have spent the past 2 years being taught social cues and everything through TikTok and Instagram and a lot of visual stuff. The adults have kind of been missing. And the sad thing is when they do see adults and see how they interact and how they talk about stuff, it's always these extremes.
Extremes.
And so our students think they have to yell and scream to get their point across. I spent all year long trying to rewire some of that thought process to no, you don't. Like, you can have civil conversations. And so the one thing I've seen is the adults are not the best examples.
You think?
For our kids.
Yeah.
And our kids need good examples.
Yeah, man, you aren't kidding. Let me ask you, where do you think the kids get their perspectives from? I don't think they're turning on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or whatever. I don't know. Steve?
Just to pick up on what Greg was just saying, these tensions, everything that you have on the board, what an opportunity for us as the church, as the body of Christ, to enter into a conversation and just bring another spirit.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're ever going to be able to avoid these tensions. I don't know that the goal is to avoid them. As much as it is to enter into them in a way that the world sits up and notices. They might not even agree with us, but gosh, if we could learn to do that well.
Yeah. How about now? Here's a bigger question. Like, how many of you feel that you do that well? I mean, have you been in a conversation with somebody? You don't have to admit this. I mean, I know myself where you feel your temperature going up. Oh, like you feel like you are like, it's not just I disagree. Like you start having feelings about that person. It's not just that you disagree with them. Like now they've actually become something. Dave, were you going to say something?
Real quick, just at least in my experience, it's usually like one word or a phrase that goes from takes it up to boiling really quick. Either something I've said or something that the other person has said.
Yeah, all of a sudden it goes up, doesn't it? Yeah. Oh man. Greg?
So the only way to get better at talking about this stuff is practicing, unfortunately. And so most people either avoid,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Or they go full bore.
Yep.
And don't listen and don't like learn how to compromise or whatever. So again, I learned just because I have to teach it and I'm around it a lot, and it's much easier for 12-year-olds. So you don't really know what you're talking about with your parents. But
Yeah. Yeah, that's no true. Yeah, Monty, and then we'll go around.
Rick is dead on. I have a brother in this group, Ben, I love him, I've known him years through this group. And recently we understood and realized we're on opposite sides of an issue that's on the board there.
Yeah.
And so I sent him a couple articles and said, hey, explain this to me. He wrote back detailed analysis, and I felt my blood going up.
Yeah.
Just like that. And so what did I do? I didn't respond to it. I just want to know here.
Yeah.
The Lord in this room.
Yeah.
I don't want to discuss that topic anymore, but that's not the answer. It's
No,
not the answer.
I don't think so. But we're going to get into this today because this is really important. So imagine if two brothers in Christ can't talk about something because we take too much ownership of it. What else? Like, where are we going? Like, you know, and is there something of greater value than even our perspective being right? And could both perspectives have some merit that we need to sit and talk about a little bit more? Matt, go ahead.
I like that you wrote the word black and white, because I think a lot of times we see all the issues black and white.
Yeah.
Whole life of a choice. Two sides. I think in reality, a lot of gray. And then the issue. The only way to get
Got to have conversation. Yeah. I would say this, sometimes we're talking about these issues. That's the point. We're only talking about the issue. We're not talking about the mindset behind the issue. Every one of these, for any of us, is driven by an ideology and or a theology that people often don't think about. We could pick in it, like, let's just pick the abortion issue. Abortion, women's right. Anybody against a woman's right to her own body? Is anybody like principally against that? Is it somebody else's right to her body? Like when you say self-control in the scripture, like Tim, are you to have control over me, or am I to have control over me? There you go. So the abortion issue. But here's my point. Maybe the question is there what is we have to figure out how to talk about this issue. So is the issue, and this is where you have to, we're going to talk about this in a minute. Is the issue simply a woman's right to her body? Well, some think it is. And so then we have to be able to say, I don't think it is. But then what else is at risk here? What are we doing when we have an abortion? If you were to ask somebody that, like, I know what this is, women's right to your own body, but what are you doing when you have this? Well, some people say murder. Let's use a less. Okay, because somebody disagrees with you. You say that word. What are you calling them? A killer. Randy, you're a killer. A killer. Like, who wants to be called a killer? Do you think that conversation is going anywhere else? Do you see what I'm trying? We're going to get to this in just a minute. Let me give you, I'll even, we're going to put this on the board in a minute, but Arthur Brooks said this: almost no one is ever insulted into agreement. And the church, believers have been really good sometimes of just throwing the grenade, blowing it up. We said it, Bible says it, done. Now look, I believe in the scriptures, but I'm saying it ain't very shrewd as a serpent, innocent as a dove. It's like, I'm right, you're wrong, and not only are you wrong, you're a certain kind of person. You're a killer. It's like, well, wait a minute. let's be wise. Let's be, harsh word stirs up what? Anger. It does. We had no trouble getting in fights here. You just say, but a gentle answer turns away wrath. You have a goodie, wait. Calm down. Calm down. It's going to be all right. There's someone in control of the world. Guess who it's not? Us. How we live. But you say, well, what are we doing when we have an abortion? See, I'm trying to find common ground with somebody. I think if we can say we're ending something, does that be a fair statement? Let's say we're ending something. You think everybody would agree with that? Because if you let this go, something's going to happen. We don't have this, something's going to happen. Carrie?
Yeah, so you're hitting on a point that I'm learning recently. That is, if I don't find a common ground, we're not going to have a discussion. And I got a book. My wife goes to Planned Parenthood every
Yeah.
year. And I got a book, and it's got all these ways that you can reach out about that topic.
About this topic.
And by asking questions. And you have to have a mindset.
Yes.
Jesus did this. Jesus asked how many questions?
Yes. Tons.
He taught
Tons.
by questions.
Tons.
And if we can have a mindset that that person is loved by God, despite of whatever, and have a mindset that their salvation is what is important, no matter what the issue, then I'm going to be asking questions that are leading that way, maybe, or turning them toward Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
No.
difficult. It's not an easy thing to do.
It's not an easy thing to do. We can get better at it. So if we can agree, let's just say that, hey, yes, something is being ended. What's being ended? Pregnancy. Well, what's a pregnancy? Well, there's life. Okay, well, let's talk about this. Does that life have any value? Then we keep talking, then we have conversation more. Like, here's the deal. If I don't understand how somebody got to where they were, it'd be very hard for me to go further. And if my goal is to understand, then we say, well, tell me, what's your belief system that would feel good about that? And I want to understand that. And then can I share mine? Why? Like, this is at least why we disagree on this. Is it the only answer? And again, I know that what about the person that was raped? That's horrific. Horrific. We can't just be numb to that. But is that the only answer? Is this. And the percentage of people having abortions because of those kind of things is so minimally small. What we don't want to look at, there's been over 60 million of these. And so we've got to be thinking about what's the ideology that gets people, because people, I'm telling you this, we hold perspectives sometimes because we emotionally cling to something without really thinking sometimes about what we're hooking our wagon to. Stefan, and then we got a few more, and then I want to read a quote. We're going to talk around tables. Yeah.
I have kind of my real public thing, get down to that level of what I,
Yes.
they have to walk away.
Yeah.
But then it becomes personal.
Yes.
Then they really don't want to talk about it. So they hold to their bias because it's emotional.
So what Stefan's saying, if I've come for the guys on Zoom, is that when you really get down to the bottom and it really touches with the nerve, that what it really is, and you're able to get to that level, people end up walking away because now they don't know what to do with that reality. It really is painful. And you know, when you think about it, what woman has a right to her own body, I totally agree. And part of the hard thing, what if you could get to the conversation to the point, and I'm playing my card on this, perfect what you said, well, what if you use that responsibility 99% of the time? You made that decision when you had sex. Now, do we want to take responsibility for what I did with my body? But you got to think about this even before you can make that statement. We got to get to some other things. Somebody had their hand. Yeah, Harry?
Well, I'm with my discussions with the village. I'll say, okay, it's time to get a vaccine shot. The science said, she said, I don't believe in science.
Yeah.
Science changes its mind.
Yeah.
Medicine changes its mind. I don't believe any of it.
Yeah.
And so the degree to which you look at scientific inquiry and scientific and statistics and all of that is going to figure in here, because if you pay no attention to it, you're never going to come to an agreement.
Well, here's the crazy thing here about what you're saying. Like you're saying that, so you look at the science about the vaccine and it supports it. I could tell you 5 doctors right now who are world renowned in their fields, world renowned, virologists, cardiologists, world renowned, that disagree with the vaccine. They were heroes on Monday when they let the world know why they disagreed with it on Tuesday. They were censored on Wednesday and nobody was asking them their opinion. These guys aren't bringing crap. Like I'm telling you, this is my point. How do we have these conversations? And in a culture that won't let the two sides have a conversation, because we do it in politics, we do it in theology. Well, if this is so important, don't you think in medicine we ought to have that conversation in front of the public? What are we hiding? Like, what is so threat? We can't have the conversation. This goes deeper, but again, I get jacked up about this too, but I know this. If you want to move the needle, you got to think about who you are in these conversations. I don't want to be another piece of dynamite. I want to be heard, and I think there is a better way to do that. Okay, we're having, Steve, were you going to say something? And then Tim, and then Dr. Ron. Yep, and then I want to read you something, and then we'll get some table time.
So, Goody, I'm just wondering if even before we figure out what the best questions
Yeah.
are, that we don't have to adopt a posture that recognizes personally. If we're having a conversation with somebody in the church,
Yep,
there's a oneness
yep,
in our identity in Christ that, pardon the expression, trumps everything else.
yeah,
And if it's outside the church, I mean, pick your hot button issue on that board. There are going to be people who had abortions,
yes,
spending eternity with you, worshiping
Yes.
Jesus Christ. There are going to
Yes.
be doctors who performed abortions.
yes,
Like I wish this was an original thought, but this is Andy Stanley's new book, Not in It to Win It. That there's something bigger, that the church's mission is bigger than winning these arguments. As important as it, and it's not about not engaging, and it's not about speaking truth. You can do all of those things. But if at the end what we're doing is pushing people away from Jesus Christ, if we're damaging our own witness and testimony, we've lost.
See, do you think that there's a ploy of the evil one? Think about this. That as believers, you think about it, we feel so noble, so that this is why we exist. It's not unimportant. But what Steve said is really true. Like, people coming to know Jesus Christ, do you think Jesus is going to speak to somebody about this? If they're serious about knowing the Lord, do you think Jesus cares about people who are maybe being tortured in other countries coming here? I care about people coming here, but coming here the right way. I care about that. These are deep issues, and these are complex. These are not one-dimensional. I care about people that struggle with this. I have friends. I know people. I also have convictions. And, some of this, the Lord's going to sort out. I get angry every time I pull into a gas station. I mean, I'm like, I have opinions about leadership. I think, man, we can't do 2 things at one time. Like, what? And I've talked myself off the ledge more than once. And had the Lord, and then I come back to, hey, Goody, have I ever not taken care of you? Yeah, no. How are you going to talk about this? Yeah, okay, great. How are you going to talk about the government even? You can disagree without being dishonoring. These are all important things. Tim, you were going to say something, and then Dr. Ron, were you going to say, okay, Tim, then we'll.
It's really, the book you just gave us, the 3 30-day habits, some of the 5.
Yeah, win the day.
For the day. So, it's about perspective association. Every one of us is taught what we learned.
Yes.
And if we treat someone, once we learn those things, we associate certain things. We have a campaign not long ago, change. And those are beautiful words that you knock them behind.
Mm.
We have a community that's taken over the flag. Okay, but make a flag out of the rainbow. The rainbow was for everybody. Now it's supposed to be something special.
Yeah.
But my point is, once it is that thing to that person, it's part of it.
Yes.
So you're attacking something deeper than the individual.
Yeah.
They're not defending science. They don't
Yep.
care.
Yep.
They have associated something with
Yep.
part of who they are. You're attacking that. And you're attacking that. And that's why
That's so important. You have to, what I hear you saying is a lot of times people's identity gets connected to this. So when,
I just have to say, Margaret Sanger is vehemently
Oh,
anti-abortion.
yes,
I just finished her little book, Women Under Rights. Highly recommend it. Quick read, it's on the page. Says the biggest atrocity man could ever do is have the overpopulation is the next one. But basic stuff. She was
that's amazing. She started Planned Parenthood basically in
yeah,
the
she
very,
said, well, she started paying attention. We looked at her like, oh, she's the hero. Not we. Women will hold her up. She was anti-abortion. She would hold her over her grave. I'm just saying, perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
People
yeah.
think of her as like this preventing pregnancy. You should not be allowed to say no if you're Catholic.
yeah.
Or you say, I have to have sex, I keep having babies, I'm not allowed to say no. She's like overconfident.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah, thank you. Good point. I want to read you something real quick. Dr. Ron, John,
I think as believers, we have a great example of model in front of us. If we look at the writings of Paul,
yes,
he always starts off in people on neutral ground before he has a message.
you must have looked at the scripture, Dr. Ron, that we're going to look at today. Look at that. We are going to look at this. We're having a big table talk today. This is really good, Dr. Ron. So how did Paul do this? Do you think we're the first ones that have to navigate cultural craziness? I don't think so. John?
I just want to underscore the point of how you said we got to ask questions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not in my personality to discuss that way a lot. I mean, I ask questions, but not enough questions. And I have seen a friend of mine, Life Center, the professor at Yale, we were having a dinner discussion with a very far left liberal. And I mean, politically, she's just off the chart. The questioning, he answered every one of her questions with just asking her another question and just brilliantly backed her into the corner. I have never seen anything like that before.
And it wasn't like he was mean or trying to be.
It was over dinner. Nobody got mad.
Did he pay for dinner?
Finally, at the end of dinner, I said, Jan, you are not going to win this discussion.
Yeah.
This is what he does for a living.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, let me put up a quote for you guys from a book. Dwayne, can you do that first one? Thank you. Nope. Next one. That's a different week. We're at a different week. We're at week 8. We can do that. Is week 8 up there or only week 7? Don't worry about it. I'll read it. This comes from a book. I've recommended this book to you guys called Love Your Enemies by Arthur Brooks. Let me tell you about Arthur Brooks. Arthur Brooks is a conservative Catholic. If you were to give him a label, he would say that probably. But get this, he teaches at Harvard School of Public Leadership. And he writes quite a bit. So let me do this for you. Get this, listen to this. We don't have an anger problem in American politics. Get this, we have a contempt problem. If you listen to how people talk to each other in political life today, you notice it is with pure contempt. When somebody around you treats you with contempt, you never quite forget it. You guys know what contempt is? It basically, it's a bitterness, it's a devaluing, it's almost like you're not even worth the time. So if we want to solve the problem of polarization today, we have to solve the contempt problem. This came out of his book, How to Love Your Enemies, which is in subtitle, How Decent People Can Save America from the Culture of Contempt. This is really powerful. It's a great read, very practical, tons of real illustrations in there. And then the second one, thank you, because you could, thank you, is that no one, I just put up 2 quotes to give you a feel for the book. Almost no one is ever insulted into agreement. How true that is, right? So here's a couple of things we're going to do a table talk. We're going to shorten this a little bit. I want us to look at Acts chapter 17. But as you guys may be open to that on your phones or the scriptures, I just want to ask you to just put this into your brain, just to think, how are you prone to respond to or feel about people that you disagree with? concerning things that you feel strongly about. You're like, I feel really strongly about this, and you disagree with me, Greg. So how do I eventually start feeling about Greg? Or Monty about Ben, or Ben about Monty, you're two brothers, but man, we disagree about this. And I know which topic it is up here because I know Ben. And so, we disagree. And so, but like, how do we start feeling about each other? Does it lessen, or does it like, well, wait a minute, like, we're brothers. Maybe there's some things we can learn from each other. And maybe we'll come down to like, we agree on 80%, but we disagree on 20. But what we're not going to disagree with is treating each other in a way, if the world would watch our conversation, they're going to be, you guys are no different than anybody else. And so this takes a little bit of work. But let's turn to Acts chapter 17. Acts 13 and 14, you'll also see this with Paul. We're not going to go there. Thank you, Dwayne, for your help. Man, Dwayne is doing it here. I want to take a look at this one where Paul goes into he's going into Athens, and this is interesting. He's waiting for Timothy and Silas to get there. And while he's waiting, he's in this culture that is very, not only, it's known basically, it's very pantheistic, which means it's very nature worship, kind of gods of nature, and it's leaning in that direction. It's a place of commerce. There's a lot of idols there. Worship's a big deal. It's just the object, not if. There's sexual stuff going on there. Athens right now is not at the pinnacle of its high point, but it still has a lot of power, a tremendous amount of history. And Paul walks into this environment, and I just want you to, let's look at verse 16 just for a minute, and then we'll go down. It says, while Paul was waiting for them, that's Timothy and Silas in Athens, get this, he was greatly, does anybody have what it says there? Distressed to see that the city was full of idols. Like he's there and he's like, my gosh, like what is going on? Like this is crazy, right? So he begins to what? Reason. Didn't say he began to scream and yell. He said he began to reason with the Greeks that were there in the synagogue, with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace, day by day with those who happened to be there. Now, there was a group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers who began to dispute with him, and some of them asked, what is this babbler trying to say? How do you think they like Paul? Now, let me give you a little sense. Any of you guys know what a Epicurean, what sort of their perspective on life was, an Epicurean philosopher? Well, for an Epicurean, pleasure was chief. They kind of majored in life being free of pain. And so pleasure for them was the goal, if you will. And a Stoic, when you think of somebody being kind of stoic, they kind of fell more down on the reason of thing and man's mental abilities and man's self-sufficiency. They weren't overly emotional about things. They were more cerebral, focused, stoic. You're being very stoic right now, Ben. We're going to have this conversation about, just kind of a mental thing. Where the Epicureans were a little more free-flowing, a little more pleasure-oriented. They wanted to get everything out of life that they possibly could. So he's kind of talking about both of them. They call Paul a babbler. I did a little work on that word. That word kind of is imagery, is sort of like birds picking up grain or scraps, collecting scraps of junk. He's just saying, you're just kind of snapping up ideas all over the place, Paul. Like, come on here. What are you doing? And so you think there's any kind of tension going on? Yeah, you can believe it. So get about this. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about who? Jesus, and what? So what did he make priority? Again, Jesus, right? He could have come in and said, man, you guys are just nuts, idolaters. God's going to bring down fire on you. Don't you know? He just enters in. We're going to hear the conversation in a minute. He begins to reason because he has a goal that he really wants them to meet a person. And that'll take care of a lot of this crazy behavior. So we go on a little bit more. Let's look down verse 22. So then it says, Paul stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus. Do you guys know what the Areopagus is? The Areopagus was the chief judicial body in Athens. You could say that they exercised jurisdiction over matters of religion and education. He stood up with Bailey and Mati in the room, standing up kind of with the judicial body, the lawyers, and he's making his case. How about it? Huh?
I think he started by saying first.
Yeah. Here's what he did say. It says, then Paul stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and he says, men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very what? Religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship. Isn't this amazing? Like, what do you hear Paul doing right there? He says, man, I came in here and I noticed something about you guys. Now, here's again, you think Paul agrees with what they're worshiping? No. But what does he do when he goes in? He's trying to find, at least, he's affirming something that they what? They're worshipers. That's a plus. I think he's trying to find some common ground. It's not that he's not going to say something. He's going to say something. But he's going to have to create an environment where he can actually say something and it has a chance to land. So he affirms who they are. That tends to be a little bit more heartwarming and drawing, persuasive, right? I can see it. You're very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription to an unknown God. Wow. Now get this. Now what you worship is something unknown. I'm going to proclaim to you. Like, how much interest do you think he generates through that statement? You worship something that's unknown. You know what I'm going to do, Tim? I'm going to proclaim to you something that you can know about this unknown God. What? Okay, you got my ear. I'm willing to listen a little more to that. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? And then he goes this. Then he makes a proclamation. He goes, the God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and he does not live in temples built by hands. Get this. He is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives men life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set out for them and the exact places where they should live. Now get this. God did this so that men would seek him, going back to the fact that they worship, and perhaps reach out to him and even find him, though he's not far from each one of us. Now, you guys may or may not know this, but in verse 28, Paul is actually quoting one of their cultural poets. He's taking their literature to make his case. He's basically saying, this God that you don't know, the one who literally made every man in every place, this God did this so that men would seek him and reach out to him and actually find him. This unknown God, you can find this, quote, unknown God, because he's not far from any one of us. Now, here's their point. For in this God, we live and we move and we have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. It's pretty powerful, isn't it? When you use somebody else's information to make your case. What does it take to do that? You got to know the other perspective and not just your own. How many of us go into dialogue and the only perspective we have is whose? Is my own. How do you think these guys felt when they got Paul quoting them, their poets, their background, Paul's using for his case? And he goes on, therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone that you can imagine. He's looking at it, an image made by man's design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, and now he brings some heat. But now he commands that all people everywhere repent, for he has set a day where he will judge the world with his justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead. Paul says, you want to have a conversation? Now let's talk about that. Pointing him to Jesus Christ. What do you guys notice about this? Just this reading? Anything that we can learn? I mean, a few quick things hit me right away. Number one, he affirms what he sees. He finds some affirmation. Second of all, he gives a bigger narrative. He indirectly spreads things out a bit. Dave?
So in verse 24, it was a fairly long sentence. I can't imagine people have been able, or even think today, if we started off with that, you'd get shouted, you wouldn't even be able to finish the sentence. You'd be shouted down. Without what proceeded.
Yes, totally. Think he tries to find some common ground? Yeah, Greg?
It also understands the audience.
Yeah.
Has some relational parts, even if he doesn't agree with them, he knows where they're coming from. And so I think that's some of what we've lost. We don't know
We don't know who we're talking about. Oh, so good. Chris?
He also approaches with grace
Grace
and truth.
and truth.
So it's not rejected.
Oh, grace and truth. Isn't that beautiful? He's gracious, but it's not like, if I have a conversation with somebody about this, let's say this, or, this, or, this, I mean, like any of them, right? And I'm listening, and it depends. I want them to really feel loved. I want to find kind of ground. But at some point, I'm going to probably make some declaration of truth regarding some of this, and be able to bring the whole, at least a feeling of the whole thing. And Paul is masterful at this. You can also study a different interchange that he had in Acts 13 and also in Acts 14, because he had a different conversation based on the people that he was talking to there. And so context matters. I'm probably not going to get into it with a group of people in a group conversation, like a massive, this is really being, and Chris, I'll come right back. This is really to our little core team that we have. We had a question that came up, and Ben, this is so great, was, hey, good, what if we did a session on hot topics? I said, oh, that would be really good and maybe not so good, because we could like clean out a room and we said, well, why don't we do this? Maybe as a core team, why don't we have some conversation around hot topics and see if we're able to do it before we bring it to 200 different guys and try to figure this thing out. That could be crazy, right? But we have to be able to be nimble enough to learn how to walk in these different environments with people. So, Chris, you're going to. Well-trained. He knew how to speak. He was well-versed. I think he certainly probably knew as much about the cultures he was in as the people who were there. Paul is a unique bird. Pharisee, Greek background, knew the culture, highly trained. Yep, encountered Jesus Christ. But what is he ultimately wanting to have people do? Is it to do what? To recognize Jesus Christ. That's what he's hoping for. Steve?
Right after what we just read, it says, when they heard about the resurrection, some of them sneered, and others said, wait a minute, we want to hear you again about this subject, which reminds me of that other passage that Paul wrote about being all things to all people so that he might win some.
Yes. Oh. And sometimes we go into these things and our only goal is to be what? Right. I got to be right. I'm going to go home tonight, man. I kicked some pagan butt, man. I told them what it was. Feel good about myself, man. Won that fight,
The perspective I keep going back to is hereditary correct, right? So in a court case, the amount of time that's spent prior to going to trial versus the amount of time you actually spend speaking,
Enormous,
right?
enormous.
And what are you doing before you get there?
Preparation.
You're learning, understanding the
Yes.
rules, right?
Yes.
So if we spend vastly more time listening and understanding than less time just trying to win, it's amazing how, right? You just walked into the courthouse tomorrow, no prep, no nothing, but you knew all the answers. You're probably not going to success.
It would reflect in the product, in your ability, in the process, and the opposite is true. If you're prepared, it shows everyone in the courtroom can see it.
Wow. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? Listen to these words from the Apostle Paul in St. Paul, Colossians chapter 2, if I can remember it, he says, devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. He says, pray for me too, that God might open a door for the gospel, for my message. And then he said this, pray that I might proclaim it clearly as I should. And then he says this, let your conversation always be full of grace, so that you might know how to respond to each person. Let my conversation be full of grace. It doesn't say not be have conviction. It does. But it also needs to be full of grace, which means valuing another human being, not contempt. Arguments aren't going to be won by insults. And I think it just reveals our immaturity more than anything else a lot of times. Yeah, brother.
Speaking of immaturity, my fiance, a wonderful woman, very sympathetic in that in a conversation you can be a fire man, you can be fire.
Yeah, I like it.
But the first one,
Yes.
you're either putting it out or you're starting.
Life and death, the scriptures say, are in the power of what? The mouth speaks from that which fills the, who said that? Jesus did. Like, so what am I really holding on to? And some of us have more of a justice bent. I get that. I mean, it matters, but it's how we go about it. And so, I just want to give you a couple quick thoughts here that have been helpful to me, that have aided in this civil, and there's a few thoughts and papers, some thoughts out there, but just a couple. Let me just highlight a few things. One, I just am trying to look for common ground early in these conversations. I think it's really, really important. I'll go through this quickly. I think another one I have to ask is, do I really want to have a civil conversation? Sometimes I just want to fight. Like, here's what I know. I think when you're in it with somebody, you realize, hey, look, we're starting to get after it here. I would even say, okay, look, we're about ready to enter into a good conversation. Thank you, Dwayne. That's so helpful. I forgot I even had that. Decide if you're having a discussion or debate, because they're really different. Debates, typically somebody's trying to win. And I have no interest. I don't got to win anything. I want to, God is the victor. What I want to do is be able to have a discussion, which means I want to try to understand. I want to understand Matt's opinion, his perspective, believing that then I'm going to have a chance to share my own. And I really want to have it in a way that I could feed back to Matt what he's actually saying to me in a way that he says, hey, Goody, you actually understand me. You actually get it. The other one is just being humble enough to know that, maybe I'm coming into conversations. I have to at least own this, that I may not know it all or see every angle. Hey, here's one thing I know all us white guys don't know. We don't know everything that Alonzo knows, and Chris, Tim, and Dwayne, growing up African-American. They've experienced the things that you white guys, we don't know. They got history if you go down far enough that we don't know. And vice versa, but we don't know. Is that true or not true? Now, again, that doesn't mean like I'm working with some young African-American men in the city. They're great guys. They're up against some things that they did not have a say in. Literally did not have a say in. And at the same time, they're up against some things that they had 100% say in. If this makes sense. But I'm saying, if we don't think, this is about a human dynamic that we have to know. There's things that I don't know that I need to get educated more on and read and learn and think bigger and better. I get Jason Whitlock, who's an African-American journalist, one of the greatest guys. I love this brother. He loves the Lord. He says things on TV that, he talks about Jesus. He's amazing, but he said this.
What's the name?
Jason Whitlock. Jason Whitlock, I think. But he made a comment, and I think I'll get it right. He says to say that we have made progress in our country is not to deny that things still need to be worked on. We've made progress, have we? You think some things still need to be worked on? Yes. But here's where the tension comes. He goes, but to deny progress only takes people's heart and resolve away to keep moving forward. And it was really powerful to hear an African-American man say, we've made progress and we're not where we need to be yet. But if we can't at least admit that we've made some progress, it makes people's resolve to keep moving go away because they keep feeling like, and then you know, then you have white people going, oh, what else can we do? What, Mark? You know, and it gets into all this kind of craziness. We've got to be able to do this. The other value, valuing another story by listening to it. So you guys can read that. Hard things, I think, are better received in the context of relationship. You can go to the next one. I just want to highlight a couple more that really, here's another one. You guys have already got this about asking questions versus making assumptions. This is so important. I can't tell you sometimes, I realize sometimes I'll leave something and go like, oh my gosh, I made assumptions in that conversation more than asking questions. Here's another crazy one. Don't confuse a person with a group of people. Dignify people. I think a lot of them, I'm not a group. Oh, you're just one of those. Like, well, what do you mean by that? Oh, you're just one of those, all those crazy nuts who believe this. Well, wait a minute. Like, talk to me about me. I want to talk to you about you and what's going on with you. This one was really important for me. No need to fight, fix, or finish the conversation. There's no need to fight, fix, or finish the conversation. Sometimes you got to live to have a second conversation. Sometimes it's like, I just want to have enough of a good first conversation. Then maybe we have a chance to have a second one or a third one or a fourth one. Sometimes, you know, I know this. There's times that some of us had to hear about Jesus 10 times before we finally met Jesus. Gregory?
That last one really is great for marriages too.
Yes. Yes.
When you're having struggle with marriage, look at that one.
Oh, so good. So good, 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 good. Treat every person as an image bearer. Love and respect is due to every person. You aren't the final judge and you don't have to be. Isn't that kind of nice? Own your own sin, judgmentalism and arrogance. And that takes a lot to say to yourself, you know what, internally. Remember, your mind can think about what it's thinking about, to be able to say to yourself, you know what, I'm being a jerk right now. Yeah.
Something I had to kind of come up with a lot of people I talked to. And I look at each person's perspective on this. Like, you ever go discuss a movie with somebody you haven't seen?
Go discuss a movie with somebody you haven't seen it. Yeah, yeah. Like Maverick, I haven't seen that new one yet.
So what if you were sitting around arguing about what happens in that movie based on what you've heard from them?
Yeah,
Doesn't work.
doesn't work.
So if you sit down with somebody, look at their life as their movie, and you have their, and when you discuss something, hear what their movie's about, and you might figure out why they think the way they do.
That's really
And you
good.
share what your movie's about. And then you might come to some ground.
Yep.
It's usually associated with something that they learned.
Yeah.
And just know they're, just picture, you just talk about a movie.
No, you wouldn't. This is so important. And, you know, this just gets to the old illustration of the iceberg again. I tell you, man, we try to solve these things above the waterline. I'm telling you guys, it doesn't work. You got to keep going deeper, 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 deeper. If you really want to get to the point where we can connect. Yeah.
I use that all the time when I'm listening to some of the stories. Okay, it's significance, belonging, or security. That
Yep.
the real issue.
Yep.
You know, not whatever the surface is, but what's deep down. Try to listen for that.
Yes.
And then he gains some compassion and empathy and some other things. All right. And it's easier to walk away than, you know, not be mad or that.
So I'll give you a quick illustration of this understanding. So, and then I want us to talk around the tables for a few minutes and give you a question to talk about. A number of years ago, we were talking to some, you know, when Freddie Gray happened in the city and things are just blowing up and, you know, down on Pennsylvania, North Avenue. And, you know, there's some kids that came right out of Douglas High School that were helping, you know, high school kids doing crazy stuff. You may have seen this one mom who went and got her kid. He was on the news. And the next thing you see this mom grabbing her son, man. He is getting lit up by mama, you know, like that was the wrong cameraman. But anyway, so we had a group of guys, young men together afterwards, and we were talking about this, you know, and they were like really pissed off and mad, and, you know, and police brutality. I'm thinking, oh gosh, like how do we have a conversation about that? So like, let me ask you, do you think that there is such thing as police brutality? Yes. Do you think every cop is a great cop?
No.
No. Do you think most of them go to work every day trying to do the best they can?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, but there are bad nuts in the bunch. We know that's true. You know what I mean? I get it. So, again, we can put defund the police up here again. You're like, what are you really saying? Like, come on. So, but I'm looking at these guys and I'm going like, hey, so we get this conversation like, hey, who owned that store that got burned down? I go, what do you mean? I go, somebody's store. They worked their whole life for that store. Somebody didn't do it, burn it down. So what was your store? I go, there's people in your neighborhood, they can't get medication now. And now there's people going there stealing drugs and selling it on the street. So we're going, I go like, if there was an injustice, I said, do you ever think that there's a wrong way to do a right thing? There's actually a wrong way to go about doing a right thing. Like trying to have a voice is a right thing. You think that's the way to do it? Oh, we know that. Like, no. And then you think, well, you don't know. Like, I'm just telling you, this is how we have to have conversations that go deeper about value, about human life, about if it was me, does it matter? This goes even beyond, it is a black-white issue. We have to deal with that issue and how people are treated and valued. Wouldn't it be great if those kids could say, hey, that cop that did that needs to be dealt with. Whoever did that. But we need to also, the other one I put up here, you better be educated when you have these conversations. That's the other one. Don't bring a couple, nightly news tidbit shots out and think that you've got to be able to enter this conversation. If you want to enter it in, Paul was highly educated. You better know a little bit, like going to a court case, which is a great illustration. If I'm going to show up to the floor of discussion, I better have some good information and not just my ingrained perspective that's very subjective. And I'm not saying it's all you got. That's fine. You can bring some of that too. But there needs to be some objectivity and information to some of this stuff to give it some power. Make sense? So here's a question. Dwayne, if we could go back to the table talk section, we got 15 minutes. Let's think about this last one. What piece of advice might you offer to yourself going forward, knowing you as you do, as you enter into some of these civil conversations that can be very tension-filled? Just from what we've talked about today, we haven't solved it. Like, is there any advice that you might want to offer to yourself and how you might begin to work on this a little bit? And then we'll come together and say a prayer and we'll do our verse. Sound good? So just take 15 minutes and do this together. That'd be really, we had a big table talk today, was our big group. So that was great. You guys want to join up? Let's do that. That'd be fine. Be great. Minutes. I'd love to pull us together for just a moment, another moment. So let's do this. Hey, would a couple of you guys be willing to just kind of share what your piece of advice was that you're offering yourself? Would a couple of you be willing to do that? Anybody? Say, yeah, I can share. Here's my little piece of advice for myself. My piece of advice would be, anybody? Yeah.
So for me, the piece of advice would be, remembering in conversation where my identity lies, but also where the identity of the person is.
That's great, Johnny.
Higher identity, like I was talking to these guys before the great differences about civil conversations is our identity.
Yeah.
And if we attach it to an issue or a style, that has one certain world realizes start seeing people not as people, but
I want to just say it so you guys can hear him. Guys, now this is really, really good. He goes, one of the things we don't realize is we often attach our identity to our perspective of something. And so what I need to do is remind myself of my identity really in the Lord, and that other person's value and identity as a human being, and not to just getting Velcroed to that perspective, and that's all I am or they are. And then where I get so threatened if somebody disagrees with me or we have a different perspective. Really, really good. Man, I can identify with that one. Yeah, Ken?
Harry asked me to share my thoughts. So when I get into feeling that you described, that you start off with feel
Feel that blood boiling, kind of coming up.
when I get to that point, I am myself, but then person back to the same as me.
Hmm.
And that helps bring my
Temperature down. Yeah, so you're saying as you feel the boil, you're reminding yourself that that person is loved just as much by God as you, has just as much value as you, and you're no better than them, even though you might disagree. And it really, gosh, it is so hard because if you feel you're right, and you might even be, but sometimes we feel being right means more value, and it doesn't. It just means you're right. And sometimes you're wrong. So when you're wrong, does that mean you have less value? No, it doesn't. And so these are really important. Now, how about maybe one more? Thank you, Charles.
Thinking about this, and what is the mindset of actually going through this conversation? Those issues that you have, right? God-loving Christians can come on both sides. Right?
Yeah.
If you're on one side, I'm humble enough that after discussion, you can change your mind.
Yeah. Charles was saying to he needs to say to himself is we can have believers on both sides. Am I willing to be humble enough that I'm willing to change my mind? Maybe or mine just said, hey, no matter what, I'm stuck here. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to learn more. I'm not going to have my perspective grow at all. So the humility piece is huge. Yeah. Thank you, Charles. Tim?
Perspective changes time as we age.
Perspective does change over time. Yep.
And stayed up on the Earth Day. And
Yep.
all about, it's like things change.
Yeah.
Look at Bill Maher. He was the biggest liberal on the face of the earth. Right?
Yeah.
Right now he's constantly being attacked by today's Democrats.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, you do. It's interesting. The hills that you're willing to die on, the older you get, they're fewer. I can tell you that. It's like you just don't have the energy to want to fight every battle, But there are some things that you feel like, hey, we have to wade in. I just want to say to you guys, thank you for being willing to jump into some of these things. This tension this session came out of knowing that this is where we live, and I do too. Dr. Ron, you were going to say something? Yes. Very important. Amen. And the great question is, I don't have to win, but I will say this, the good news is we win with the Lord. Like the Lord really is taking history someplace. We talked about that. And we got to have these conversations in light of that bigger thing. And I think as part of our own growth, old and new, why do I get so jacked up about this thing? Like, help me understand this, Lord. I want to be caring about things the way they need to be, but also in the right way. So these are all things we're going to keep thinking about. But you guys, I appreciate you. You guys are courageous, and God willing, we will be back September 15th in this room. And I would say, hey, we all know one, meaning one other guy. I'm telling you, invite him. We got more room. We got a lot of guys are out today for a number of reasons, but we're here, and it's exciting what's going on. You guys, there's a whole other group Monday night that's doing this, and it's very exciting. And so I just want to encourage you, it's really easy to think, I go to this. Well, maybe we can do this. Hey, John, you want to come with me? Like, I'm going to this. You sit at my table, Ben Mortensen has probably had 4 or 5 new guys come because he says, hey, just come once. If you don't like it, don't come again. Just come once. See what it's like. It doesn't hurt, So I appreciate you guys. Also, table leaders, if you guys are going to get together as your table this summer, you guys are going to be figuring that out, what you're going to do, how often, what you want to do. You guys can be asking about that. And this morning, we need to leave 6 tables up. So the 2 back ones, John, yours and the one that's empty, and then Steve, maybe Zach, Steve, and Eric's table, we'll take those down, but the rest of them will leave up. All right. There's staff meeting in here at 10:30. So let's do it for one last time. Not that you should think about it again, but we're going to have another one for you in September. But we're going to try to get you to know Philippians 4:8 at some point in time. Here we go. Here we go. Let's do it together. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. That helps civil conversations right there.